I knew something was wrong the second my son leaned in and whispered, "Please don't tell anyone you're my mom." Not loud, not rude, just quiet enough to hurt the most. Like I was a secret, like I was something to tuck away when guests came over. I didn't ask him why. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled at the man watering his perfect lawn across the street and waved like I was only visiting, like I didn't belong there, like I hadn't crossed the country just to see my own child. The trip from Oregon to Connecticut had taken everything out of me. 2 flights, a long taxi ride, knees stiff, back aching, but I still carried a small suitcase and a tin of raspberry scones, the kind he used to beg for when he was a boy. I never complained, not when I worked double shifts at the clinic, not when I paid for his college, not when I helped him buy the house he now walked me into like I was a stranger. "Shoes off here," he said. "Carla just had the floors done." I bent slowly to untie my shoes. The hallway looked like something out of a magazine. Clean lines, cold beauty, not a single place to hang my coat. I held it in my hands, unsure what to do with myself. That's when Carla came in from the kitchen, wine glass in one hand, phone in the other. "Oh, welcome," she said, smiling without really smiling. "We weren't sure which flight you were on. I texted yesterday," I said gently. "Right," she replied, already walking away. "Well, we have a neighborhood thing tonight. Hope that's okay." Daniel took my coat and slipped it into a narrow closet by the door. Not the big one. That one was full of expensive jackets and polished shoes, the kind of clothes people buy when they're trying to look like someone else. The living room was beautiful. I'll give them that. Neutral colors, sharp corners, everything placed just right. But there wasn't a single picture of my son as a child. Not one photo of us together. Only frames of Carla's family. Trips to Europe. Smiling siblings. Her children from before she met Daniel. I stood there holding the tin of scones like I was holding proof of a life nobody wanted to remember. "You can leave those in the kitchen," Carla said. "We're doing gluten-free right now, but the kids might try them." The kids, her kids. They peeked around the corner, muttered a hello, then disappeared upstairs. They didn't know me. They had never even heard my voice on the phone. And my own granddaughter was sleeping somewhere in a white crib that looked more like a gadget than a place for a baby to dream. "We'll show you the guest room," Daniel said. "Not your room, not your home, just a place to sleep." He led me down the hallway past a door labeled private office, like I had walked into a business, not my son's house. The guest room was clean, but cold. No books. No chair. Just a bed and a small stand for luggage. On the nightstand was a card that read, "Welcome guests. WIFI password below." Guests. That word stayed with me. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my legs rest. Just try to be relaxed tonight, Daniel said. It's mostly Carla's friends, doctors, architects. You know that crowd. Of course I knew. He meant. Don't talk too much. Don't say who you really are. Don't embarrass me. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. I sat there staring at the white walls, then opened my purse and touched the envelope I always carried. Inside was the deed. Because when Daniel couldn't get approved for the mortgage, he had needed me. My name was still on the house. Legally, it was mine as much as his. Actually, more. I had paid the entire down payment from my savings. Money I had built over decades. Money I never spent on myself. He told me it was just paperwork. Just until he refinanced. Just until he got on his feet. I believed him. I always did. That evening, the house filled with voices. Neighbors, friends. People who looked like they had never struggled a day in their lives. Carla introduced me as a family friend, not his mother, not the woman who raised him, just someone who used to know him. I smiled anyway, because that's what mothers do when their hearts are breaking in public. Later, when the house finally grew quiet, I sat alone on the guest bed and stared at my phone. I looked at the photo I had taken of the deed earlier that day, not because I wanted power, but because I needed to remember I wasn't invisible. I remembered the night he called me, years ago, his voice shaking with hope. This house is perfect, Mom. We just need a little help. Just on paper. I sold bonds I had been saving since his father died. Took the tax hit. Did it all without hesitation. I thought I was building something for my family. But sitting there in that cold guest room, listening to my own son laugh downstairs with people who thought I was just a friend, I realized something painful. I hadn't built security. I had rented love. The next morning, Carla handed me a schedule like I was checking into a retreat. They would be gone all day. Soccer practice, baby class, lunch plans. You're welcome to stay and relax, she said. Relax meant stay out of the way. When they left, the house felt bigger, too big, too perfect, too empty of anything real. I walked through the room slowly, noticing what wasn't there. No family photos, no memories, no mess. Just a life built to look good to strangers. And that's when I understood something I had been avoiding. This house had space for everyone, except me. The next morning, the house was already alive before I even reached the kitchen. Carla stood at the counter blending fruit and yogurt like she was running a cafe. Daniel leaned against the fridge, scrolling through his phone. Neither of them looked up when I walked in. Morning, I said. Morning, Daniel replied automatically, still staring at his screen. I poured myself a cup of coffee from their shiny machine, the kind that looks like it needs instructions just to work. The coffee tasted thin and bitter. I drank it anyway. Carla finally turned around. We're heading out soon. Farmer's market first, then the park with the kids. That sounds nice, I said. I might take a walk around the neighborhood. Daniel looked up then, really looked at me. You're sure you're okay with that? He asked. This area is pretty particular. Just don't talk to anyone too long. I tilted my head slightly. Why would I? No reason, he said quickly. People here can be strange about things. I nodded like I didn't understand what he meant. But I did. After they left, the house fell silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel louder just by breathing. I walked through the rooms slowly. I had never been invited here before this visit. There was always an excuse. Too busy. House not ready. Travel too complicated. Now I saw what ready really meant. Ready meant perfect. Ready meant controlled. Ready meant no room for a woman like me. In the hallway, I stopped in front of a row of black and white photos. Bridges, city skylines, art that looked expensive but felt empty. Not a single family photo. Not even one of the baby. I opened the laundry room door. Inside were stacked machines humming quietly. Beside them stood a tall cabinet. I reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside were folders and envelopes, house papers, insurance forms, and then I saw it. A beige folder I recognized instantly. The one from the day Daniel begged me to co-sign. I pulled it out. Right on top was the ownership summary. My name printed clearly above his. Not because I demanded it. Because I had paid for everything. I slid the folder back where I found it, my hands shaking just a little. I wasn't looking for proof. I already had that. I was looking for courage. That afternoon, Carla came home carrying grocery bags like trophies. We're doing bruschetta tonight, she announced. Hope you don't mind. It sounds lovely, I said. Want any help? She paused like the idea confused her. Oh no, I've got it. Everything in this house had a system, a rhythm, a way things were supposed to be, and I was not part of it. After dinner, the neighbors came over, James and Lydia from across the street. They admired the countertops, complimented the fireplace. And this is Mary Ann, Carla said quickly. Daniel's family friend. The words hit me softly, but deeply. I smiled anyway. Lydia turned to me. So how long are you staying? Just a few days, I said. It's always nice to visit places you've invested in. She blinked. Oh, are you in real estate? You could say that, I replied gently. I helped acquire this house. Daniel coughed. Carla froze. Lydia laughed politely, unsure if I was joking. Later that night, I sat alone on the edge of the guest bed again. I looked at the photo of the deed on my phone. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed armor. I remembered the night Daniel called me years ago. This is the one, Mom. This house is perfect. We just need a little help, I said yes before he even finished the sentence. I always did. I sold bonds I had been saving since his father passed away. Told myself it was for the future, for family. But sitting in that quiet room, hearing my son laugh downstairs with people who didn't know who I was, I finally admitted something I had been afraid to say. I hadn't built a future. I had rented a place in his life on a very short lease. The next morning, Carla handed me a neat schedule again. They would be gone most of the day. You're welcome to relax, she said. Relax meant stay invisible. When the door closed behind them, the house felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, and cold. I sat on the couch and tried to feel like I belonged. I couldn't. That's when I noticed the gallery wall near the stairs. 6 framed photos. Carla's parents, her kids. The baby in a professional photo shoot. No, Daniel, know me. I went upstairs slowly. At the end of the hall, one door was slightly open. Daniel's office. Inside, everything was neat. Diplomas. Awards. And then, tucked on a shelf, I saw something small. A wooden box. The one I gave him after his father died. I opened it. Inside was a tiny photo of Daniel as a child, missing a tooth, smiling wide, and beneath it, a folded note. In my handwriting, never forget who you are, and never forget who stood with you when no one else did. Love, Mom. He had kept it. Tears burned my eyes, sudden and sharp. I closed the box gently and put it back. Outside, I stepped into the backyard. Everything was trimmed to perfectly. The sandbox still wrapped in plastic. A life built without mess, without memory. Daniel came out behind me. Nice yard, I said. Yeah, he replied. I guess. We stood there in silence until I finally said it. I saw the pictures inside. He rubbed the back of his neck. Carla has a certain style, I noticed. I said. It's very efficient. He hesitated. Mom, it's not that we don't appreciate everything you've done. We do. But this house, it's part of a certain life. I turned to him slowly. You mean the kind of life where people don't have mothers who bake scones and wear old sweaters? That's not fair, he said. No, I agreed quietly. It isn't. He looked away. Carla's parents are coming next week, he added. We're having a brunch. I just think maybe it's better if you don't mention the house stuff. I wasn't planning to, I said. He exhaled. You know how people judge. You wouldn't want anyone thinking I didn't earn this. And there it was, the truth, without decoration. I looked at my son, grown and polished, and said softly, I never wanted credit, Daniel. I wanted connection. He didn't answer. That night, I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of a house that had no place for me. And for the first time, I made a decision. I would not disappear quietly. That night, I didn't really sleep. I lay on the guest bed with my hands folded over my stomach, staring at the ceiling like it might give me answers. The house made small noises, pipes settling, a distant hum from the fridge, wind brushing against expensive glass. I thought about my own mother. She never had money, never had property, but she had presence. She believed people deserved to be seen, not hidden. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized how long I had allowed myself to fade. In the early morning, Carla appeared in the doorway holding a pale cardigan and a string of fake pearls. I thought you might want something lighter for tonight, she said. It sounded polite. It wasn't. I looked at the sweater, the kind designed to disappear into a room. I brought my navy dress, I said. She smiled tightly. It's just that tonight's crowd is a little formal. You'll feel more comfortable like this. I took it. Not because I agreed. Because I was done arguing with people who mistook silence for weakness. Downstairs, the dining table had been extended, napkins folded perfectly, music playing softly from speakers hidden in the walls. Everything smelled like citrus and rosemary. Nothing smelled like home. Daniel came out wearing a button-down shirt the color of dust. Everything looks great, he said to Carla. Then she turned to me. One small thing, she added. When people ask, just say you're an old family friend visiting from Oregon. Daniel nodded. It's just easier that way. Easier for who? I wondered. The doorbell rang before I could answer. Neighbors filled the room. Smiles practiced. Voices light. And who's this? Someone asked, gesturing toward me. This is Mary Ann, Carla said quickly. She knew Daniel when he was young, practically family. Another woman laughed. I nodded. Dot smiled. Sipped wine I didn't like. They talked about school districts, property values, boat clubs. I listened. Daniel moved through the room like a host trained for approval. At one point, he leaned close and whispered, "You're doing great. Thanks for playing along." Playing. That word stayed with me. Later, in the kitchen, he followed me as I refilled my glass. I know it's strange, he said, but reputation matters to Carla. And what about mine? I asked softly. He didn't answer. That night, I stared again at the photo of the deed on my phone. Then I did something small. I emailed it to my lawyer. No message, just proof. Insurance, in case I needed it. The next morning, Carla handed me another schedule. They would be out all day again. You're welcome to stay and relax, she said. Relax meant disappear. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt different. Heavier, but also clearer. I opened the fridge. Green juices, labeled containers, nothing warm. I sat on the couch, picked up a magazine, set it down. Then I noticed the plaque outside through the window. The Thorne residence. Not even his full last name. Polished. Shortened. Easier to introduce. I took out a notepad from the nightstand and wrote one sentence. It's not bitterness, it's math. On one side of the page, I wrote everything I had given. Years worked, money saved, meals cooked, papers signed. On the other side, I wrote what I had received. Nothing. I folded the page and put it in my wallet. That afternoon, while the house slept around me, I opened my suitcase and touched the envelope again. The deed. There was a clause I had almost forgotten. One my lawyer insisted on years ago. No sale, no refinance, no changes without my written consent. I felt calm, not angry, not vindictive, just awake. When Daniel came home that evening, I looked at him differently. Not as my little boy, not as the man trying to impress his neighbors, but as someone who had forgotten, who helped him stand. That night, as I turned off the light in the guest room, I made a decision. I would stop shrinking. I would stop pretending. And I would not leave quietly. By morning, I was already awake. The house was quiet again. Daniel and Carla had taken the baby out early. Something about a music class. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that tasted like cardboard and planning my steps. First, I needed to confirm what I already knew. I walked to the laundry room without hesitation, not sneaking, not hiding. The cabinet was still unlocked. Inside, the beige folder sat exactly where I had left it. I opened it slowly. There it was, the original deed. My name printed first to clear, undeniable. I took a photo, one clear shot. Then I closed the folder and placed it back exactly as it had been. Some things don't need drama. They need precision. Next, I packed a small tote bag. Just essentials. Wallet. Keys. Glasses. One change of clothes. I wasn't running. I was preparing. When Daniel and Carla returned that afternoon, I met them in the hallway. Would you mind if I stayed here a little longer? I asked. Just a couple of days. You mentioned that weekend trip. Daniel blinked. You mean while we're gone? Yes, I said calmly. I could use the quiet. Carla hesitated. It's just the alarm system. I won't touch it, I said. I'll water the plants. Keep things locked. They exchanged a glance. Well, Daniel said slowly, that should be fine. He handed me a ring of keys. I took them gently and slipped them into my purse. That night, they packed for their trip, efficient, detached. I watched from the kitchen island like a guest in my own life. They left early the next morning. Sunscreen. Bags. The baby fussing. Daniel hugged me quickly. Text if you need anything. I smiled. Of course. When the door closed behind them, the house fell into a silence that felt different, full. I locked the door and leaned against it for a moment. Then I walked through the house slowly. I sat in the armchair I hadn't dared touch before, kicked off my shoes. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Her voice was calm, professional. I explained everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she paused, then said, "You never signed away ownership." "No," I replied. "Then the house is still yours," she said. "Legally." I felt something settle inside me. We discussed next steps, quiet ones, no shouting, no letters, just paperwork. When the call ended, I stood at the window and looked out at the perfect lawn. That evening, I cooked real food, roasted chicken, biscuits made from memory. I ate alone at the table, using the good dishes. After dinner, I found a dusty box in the garage labeled Mom. Inside were old photos, a recipe card in my handwriting, a birthday card unopened, things they couldn't throw away, but didn't want to see. I placed the box on the kitchen table, not to accuse, just to remember. Later, I sat in Daniel's office chair and opened the county property site on his computer. The address came up, my name listed first. Still true, still mine. That night, I slept in the master bedroom, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, because I finally stopped asking permission. The house felt different the next morning, not warmer, not louder, just honest. I woke up early and made coffee the way I always had, slow, strong. No machines trying to impress anyone. Sunlight spilled across the counters, catching on the polished stone that had never once asked who paid for it. At exactly 9 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. A woman stood outside in a dark blazer, holding a thin leather folder and a tablet. "Calm, professional. Mary Ann Cross?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "I'm here on behalf of your attorney." She stepped inside like she belonged there, because legally she did. We sat at the dining table. I had cleared away Carla's decorative candles and magazines. The woman opened the folder. "This is a reassignment packet," she said. "You're listed as the primary owner and funding party. All we need is your signature to initiate the filing." I didn't hesitate. I signed each page carefully. No shaking hands, no anger, just certainty. When I finished, she nodded. "As of today, the reassignment is in progress," she said. "You'll receive confirmation soon." She paused, then added quietly, "You're not the first mother I've seen in this position." I raised an eyebrow. She gave a small smile. People who give everything are often asked to disappear. When she left, the house was silent again. I sat there for a long time, the folder resting on the table, not celebrating, not grieving, just breathing. Later that afternoon, I went into Daniel's office and opened a drawer. Inside, beneath stacks of magazines, was a spare set of keys. Garage. Office. Fireproof box. I took them. In the garage, I opened a bin labeled Mom. Inside were framed photos of Daniel and me. Graduation, A beach trip years ago. Memories they couldn't destroy, only hide. I carried the box inside and lined the items neatly on the kitchen table. Evidence without accusation. That evening, I cooked again. Not fancy, just real. I ate slowly, listening to the house settle around me. Later, I wrote a note. Daniel, you asked me not to tell people I was your mother, so I didn't. You asked me not to talk about the house, so I didn't. You didn't ask me to sign it away, so I didn't. I won't disappear. Love, Mom. I folded the note and placed it on his desk, on top of the paperwork. That night, I opened all the doors. Front. Back. Garage. I let the air move through the house. I slept peacefully for the first time since arriving. They came back on a Sunday afternoon. Carla walked in first, already talking, already tense. The baby fussed in her arms. Daniel followed, dragging a suitcase, keys still in his hand. Mom, he called out. No answer. Carla frowned. Maybe she's resting. Daniel checked the guest room. The bed was made. The closet was empty. Something shifted in his expression. In the hallway, he stopped. Carla, he said quietly, come here. She stepped beside him and saw it. A framed photo on the console table. Daniel and me at the beach. Wind in our hair. My hand on his back. That wasn't there before, Carla said. Daniel didn't respond. He walked to his office. On the desk sat a folded note. He read it slowly. Carla stood in the doorway, growing uneasy. What is it? She asked. He picked up the second document beneath it. The reassignment summary. His name was gone. Only mine remained. Carla stepped forward. This can't be real. It is, Daniel said softly. She never signed it away. He continued. She always owned it. Carla's voice rose. So she just takes the house. Daniel shook his head. She's not taking anything, he said. She's reminding us. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked through the house slowly, noticing the small changes. The photo, the quiet, the absence in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter and stared at the floor. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't demanded. She had simply stopped shrinking. Outside, the plaque caught the porch light. The Thorne residence. Daniel crouched and touched the letters. For the first time, they felt heavy. He sat on the steps until the sky began to lighten. And somewhere between night and morning, he understood something he had avoided for years. He hadn't earned this life alone. I didn't go back to the house, not because I was afraid, not because I wasn't welcome, but because the house was never the point. A week after the paperwork was filed, I sat in a small office back home in Oregon, the same place where I once signed papers to help my son build a future. This time, I was signing for myself. The notary asked who the beneficiary would be. My granddaughter, I said. She's still young. He nodded and explained the trust details. I listened calmly. When I left, I carried nothing but a receipt and a quiet sense of balance. A few days later, Daniel called. I let the phone ring once before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. "I got the documents," he continued. "It's real." "Yes," I replied. There was a long pause. "You could have talked to me first," he said. "I tried," I answered gently. "Years ago," he exhaled slowly. "I didn't think you'd really do it. I didn't think I'd have to," I said. Silence again. Then he asked, "What happens to the house now?" "It's going into a trust," I said. "For your daughter." Another pause. "That's fair," he said finally. It was the first honest thing he'd said in a long time. Weeks passed. Life grew quieter, not emptier. I baked again, tended my garden, wrote letters. My granddaughter called one afternoon. "Grandma," she said, serious as only children can be, "Daddy says you gave me a house." I laughed softly. One day, I told her, "If you want it." She thought for a moment. "Can I paint my room pink?" "You can paint it any color you like," she giggled. "Will you live there with me?" "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "But I'll always be nearby. Promise." "I promise." Daniel still calls sometimes. On birthdays. On holidays. We don't talk about the house. We don't need to. Carla never called. That was fine. Some conversations finish without words. One spring afternoon, I sat on my porch wrapped in a blanket, watching petals drift across the sidewalk. The sun was warm, not demanding, and I thought about everything that had happened. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't embarrassed anyone. I hadn't asked for applause. I had simply stopped disappearing. And if someone ever asks how a quiet woman crossed the country and came back with more than she brought, I'll tell them this: sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes love has memory. Sometimes the quietest person in the room owns the foundation beneath everyone else's feet. And sometimes the house remembers who built it.